The most iconic image of the Vietnam War was the helicopter. Whether used as an observation, medical evacuation, troop transport, or gunship, their primary aircraft was the Bell Iroquois UH-1 Huey, of which 3,254 were lost due to combat. Helicopter crews also had high casualties, both killed and wounded, and the men who flew these missions were made of steel. They had to be, and as a result, a few became some of the most highly decorated airmen in our nation's history. Who was Bruce P. Crandall? What actions did he perform to receive the Medal of Honor? Why did it take so many years for his bravery to be recognized with the Medal of Honor?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former soldier, Marine Corps Scout Sniper, history professor, historian and book author, and we will answer these questions and other issues on this segment of Forgotten History.
In the film, We Were Soldiers, adapted from the book written by Lieutenant General Harold G. Moore and Joseph L. Galloway, Bruce P. Crandall was depicted by actor Greg Kinnear, who flew multiple missions into Landing Zone Xray during the Battle of the Ia Drang Valley, which commenced on November 14, 1965. Crandall would play a major role. Bruce Perry Crandall was born on February 17, 1933, and raised in Olympia, Washington State. He attended public schools and became an All-American baseball player in high school. Later, he attended the University of Washington in Seattle and was hoping to get drafted by the New York Yankees, but he was drafted instead into the U.S. Army in 1953 during the Korean War, but did not deploy there. Crandall graduated from the Engineer Officer Candidate School, Fort Belvoir in Virginia, in 1954, and assigned to the Fixed Wing and Helicopter Training Program conducted by the Army and the Air Force. He started flying the Cessna L-19 Bird Dog and de Havilland, Canada DHC-2 Beavers after being transferred to Alaska performing military topographical studies. His first overseas flying assignment was to Wheelus Air Base in Tripoli, Libya, where he spent 2 years mapping the Sahara Desert. He then became an instructor pilot and unit test pilot. Crandall then transferred to Howard Air Force Base, Panama, also flying out of Costa Rica. He flew over thousands of square miles of previously unmapped mountains and jungles in Central and South America. He then helped to develop air assault tactics as a platoon leader while assigned to the 11th Air Assault Division. His next assignment was a major to South Vietnam, where he commanded the 1st Cavalry Division's Company A, 229th Assault Helicopter Battalion at Camp Radcliffe, An Khê, Vietnam. He led a flying unit supporting 8 battalions on the ground, using the call sign Agent Serpent 6. This was where he earned his nickname, Snake. The Vietnam War was not yet a major conflict. Most of the engagements had been between U.S. Army Special Forces advisors and contacts with the Viet Cong, and a few NVA units, but on a very small level, rarely exceeding platoon-sized engagements. This was the first major engagement of the war between regular U.S. and North Vietnamese forces, when elements of the 3rd Brigade 1st Cavalry Division Air Mobile positioned themselves as an interdiction force. The Army soldiers fought a 4-day pitched battle against the Communist North Vietnamese 33rd Regiment in the Ia Drang Valley of the Central Highlands. This first contact between large forces in Vietnam would set the pace for the rest of the war. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Harold G. Moore, known as Hal Moore, and his 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment of 450 soldiers, along with men from the 2nd Battalion, 5th Cavalry Regiment, would make history, being inserted by helicopters into Landing Zone Xray. Crandall's flight of 16 helicopters inserted Moore's troops on a search and destroy mission from an area called Plai Mae to Landing Zone Xray, a remote spot in the Ia Drang Valley near the Chupong Hills. On his 5th trip into the valley, the enemy had targeted the landing zone. As the 9 unarmed helicopters dropped off troops, they came under such intense enemy fire that Lieutenant Colonel Moore ordered the other helicopters to abort the mission. At midday, the North Vietnamese 33rd Regiment attacked. The battle commenced with the NVA attack, and the Americans received support from nearby on-call artillery batteries and fixed-wing tactical airstrikes. The next morning, the North Vietnamese 66th Regiment joined the attack against the U.S. unit. The fighting was bitter, but the tactical airstrikes and artillery support took their toll on the enemy, and enabled the 1st Cavalry troopers to hold on against repeated assaults. 2 more companies arrived to reinforce the position, and Lieutenant Colonel Moore put them to good use, securing the flanks and rotating the wounded with fresh men. By the 3rd day of the battle, the Americans had gained the upper hand. One of the primary overlooked factors was the use of an on-call medevac helicopter support unit flying in under fire to extract the wounded. The dead would have to wait. However, due to the intense enemy fire, the on-call medevac unit would not fly in under orders not to risk their aircraft until the perimeter was secured. There was one man and his unit who basically said, "To hell with that." One of these was UH-1 pilot Bruce P. Crandall, along with his wingman, Major Ed Freeman. They heard the battle on the radio, and they heard the requests, and then denial of medevacs. There was no hesitation in Crandall's unit among his men, despite not being a medevac unit. Their brothers were getting shot and dying, and they were going in come hell or high water. Crandall was listening on the communications net, and he heard almost everything going on. Crandall was not assigned medevac duties, but he took it upon himself to jump in and ask for volunteers. Crandall took off without orders, and 12 of these flights were made after the assigned medevac unit again refused to land in LZ Xray, which was still under intense and continuous fire. Crandall's Hueys were unarmed. They were not gunships, and his was not a gunship, only 2 door gunners, nor was it equipped as a medevac helicopter, and the thin aluminum gave little protection from even small arms fire, let alone heavy machine guns. As he and Freeman weaved in through the valley, they had to not only dodge bullets and rockets, they also had to time their arrivals when friendly artillery would be lifted, and then avoid enemy indirect fire targeting the landing zone. During the battle, he went through a few helicopters, but one Huey was so shot up, he lost the engine and had to auto-rotate into a controlled crash landing with several wounded men on board. His continued actions saved even more lives and proved the value of the helicopter as an air ambulance. After almost every flight, he had to have the blood washed off the deck plates in his various aircraft. He learned on approach after dark that the pickup zone was surrounded by trees on 3 sides, and he was told that the medevac had previously refused to land there. To minimize the chance of hitting the trees, he decided to descend vertically. The night was pitch black, but instead of using search or landing lights, he flew blackout and instructed Captain Tony Nadal on the ground to point a flashlight straight up in the center of the touchdown area. He had landed twice this way under intense enemy fire and successfully evacuated all 12 wounded soldiers. Both helicopters were barely airworthy when he returned to base. Crandall and Freeman alone had evacuated more than 75 casualties in his helicopters during a flight day that lasted from 6 a.m. ending at 10:30 p.m., more than 16 hours later. Quoting Crandall, "It was the longest day I ever experienced in any aircraft. He had to use several helicopters throughout the day because each aircraft became badly damaged." Crandall himself flew 22 missions in his unarmed Hueys during the battle in total, each time into direct enemy fire to evacuate wounded and bring ammunition and supplies to the soldiers. He flew back to extract the dead and exfiltrate the remaining soldiers, but his Vietnam duty was not finished. During the same battle, the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry was ambushed by North Vietnamese forces as it moved on foot to Landing Zone Albany. Of the 500 men in the original column, 150 were killed, and only 84 were able to return to immediate duty. Company C suffered 93% casualties, half of them deaths. Crandall's pilots and crews responded to that location as well to try and save more American lives and deliver supplies and ammunition. The battle resulted in 834 North Vietnamese soldiers confirmed killed, and another 1,000 communist casualties were assumed. Crandall received the Distinguished Flying Cross and Distinguished Service Cross for his life-saving missions, but his career was far from over. 2 months later, on January 31st, 1966, Crandall had just finished a long day supporting the 1st Combined American and Army of the Republic of Vietnam operation called Operation Masher. He returned to refuel and shut down for the night when he was informed that a company of soldiers was in heavy enemy contact and were pinned down and threatened with being overrun. The company had reported 12 wounded soldiers who needed immediate evacuation. Then, after lifting off, while en route, Crandall learned that the unit was commanded by his friend from the Battle of Ai Drang, Captain Tony Nadal. Crandall and Nadal again worked together, air and ground, to execute a near-flawless rescue of the wounded men. Bruce Crandall was then sent home after an action-filled tour. After an assignment in Colorado, Crandall attended the Armed Forces Staff College. But not long afterwards, he was back in South Vietnam, this time flying UH-1 Huey gunships and supporting the 1st Battalion, 9th Cavalry Squadron, 1st Cavalry Division. Crandall flew ground support and attack missions, but in January 1968, his helicopter was shot down 4 months into his second tour while performing another rescue due to Air Force bombs going off too close to where he was flying. Medevaced himself along with his co-pilot, he spent 5 months in the hospital recovering from a broken back and other shrapnel and impact injuries. His war was over, but he had flown over 900 combat missions, many of them as a volunteer, impromptu medevac pilot. After Crandall recovered, he enrolled as a student at the University of Nebraska, graduating in 1969, and he became a facility engineer in Bangkok, Thailand, managing 3,800 people. In his final Army assignment, he served as senior engineer advisor to the California Army National Guard. In 1977, he retired from the Army as a lieutenant colonel. Bruce Crandall was initially awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions at Ia Drang, as was Freeman. But these were later upgraded to the Medals of Honor for both men, which had been initially recommended by Moore. In 2004, Crandall was inducted into the Army Aviation Hall of Fame.
We hope you enjoyed this segment of Forgotten History. Please click like and subscribe for free. And please stay tuned and be engaged and informed. Send us comments if you have questions or even show ideas, and we will respond to all requests and comments as soon as we can. Thank you.